you recall from the last episode, we had taken the engine out of the snowmobile and we've got it up on our workbench. I've got everything prepared to take the engine apart today to determine whether or not we've got an issue at the top end or if it lies deeper in the engine within the crank. So stay tuned and let's dig into it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the exhaust manifold. So normally you'd be able to take this valve cover off, get the heads off underneath it to get a look at the pistons and see how, see what kind of shape they're in. But I'm preparing, I suspect we're going to have to take this right down to the crank. So I'm preparing for a full disassembly. So we're going to start here with the exhaust. And then that basically comes right off. We've got some exhaust manifold gaskets, which I suspect we're going to have to replace. So those come off as well. And I can see the pistons in there so far. It looks okay to me. But we'll see more when we dig deeper. Okay, now that we've got the exhaust manifold off, we're going to turn our attention to the water pump here. So that sits on there with 2 bolts, which of course are different size, 12 millimeter. So pop this off. One, 2. Loosen that up. Get our belt off. Get away from the water pump. Water pump. On now to the recoil cage and the flywheel. Quick change in tactics here. So I was able to get the flywheel bolts off, but I do need a puller to pull that whole flywheel off the, which is a special part which I don't have on hand, so I'm going to have to order that. So we're going to switch gears, and we're going to start to attack the. We're going from the top here and see if we can get the head off. One. Okay. Now that we're all lined up and we've got the torque pattern, the cylinder heads, let's go ahead and get them apart. So to spare you all the gory details, I did break them loose with my breaker bar previously. So now we can just go ahead and remove the screws. In the Polaris service manual, there's a diagram that outlines the sequence in which the bolt should be removed. This is what I've been referring to in this segment of the video. There's cylinder number 1. You notice these are all marked too. So this is the magneto cylinder with an M on it. This is the center cylinder. And this is the PTO side. So nothing obvious on the top of these pistons. But that's just the top. So now the next step is let's get this head off and see what lurks beneath. Now it's time to take that cylinder head off and reveal what the issue is here. Let's see what we got. So what I see here are 3 good cylinders. Some good looking pistons. Which means, unfortunately, we've got a seized crank. We're getting ready to split the crankcase at this stage. So next step here is I need to remove the pistons and rings. So I will do one to show you the process here. So pardon the focus. Okay, the piston is attached with a couple of small circlips in here. So the best way to get those is I find I put a little small screwdriver in. You can press this slightly, and out they come. So there's number 1. Here's number 2. When you do this, you want to take care not to gouge the pistons at all. So I've got those circlips removed, and I'll do the same on the remaining cylinders. We're going to move on to now pulling the pistons out of the engine. What I'm using here is an SPI wrist pin removal tool. So basically I take the cap off the tool, put the threaded rod through the wrist pin, screw the cap back on, and turn the handle in a counterclockwise direction. This is the only really safe way to remove wrist pins. Now, as I turn it, you'll see the wrist pin is popping out, and once it's out, I can freely remove the piston. With this one done, I'll now move on to the other 2 cylinders, and we'll go ahead with the next steps in the process. Now I've got the pistons removed. I've noticed that each of them have got some wear on the bottom where they meet against the connecting rod. So it's very interesting. So as we dig in, we'll see if there's anything that would be contributing to that. But this number 1 cylinder also has a line down it on the piston, and I can feel that with my fingernail. So it looks like there definitely was some wear going on right at that point, but that's the only point that I see it. And there's not any corresponding wear in the cylinder. So if you happen to watch the video and you can tell me what would cause either of those conditions, I'd love to know. Get the crankcase apart. First thing we need to do is we need to remove the flywheel here and the stator. So this video will cover how to do that. So I'm using a flywheel puller here from SP1. And so to use this, it comes with it's a universal kit, so it comes with a bunch of bolts and accessories. So I'm just gonna, I found the right bolts. I put on a couple nuts here, a washer, and an extension just to make this easier. So you basically thread these on, tighten them down as evenly as you can. This is the main puller bolt. This threads on. We're going to use our impact. And off comes our flywheel. Next is the stator. And to remove that, one of the things I'm doing is I'm making note of, as you adjust this, you advance or retard the timing of the motor. So one thing I'm taking note of is just to note that this stator plate looks to be set in the middle for each of these screws. What I just described was unnecessary. If you look on the picture from the manual, there are 2 timing marks, one on the case, one on the stator plate. To set the timing correctly, all you need to do is line those 2 marks and you'll be back at factory timing. These screws are brass, so you just give them a tap. There's 3 of them. Should I do this up? Number 1. But you can see that got stuck. I just give it a tap of that hammer. Number 3. I'm going to switch camera angles, and I'll show you how to remove the plug and then remove the stator. You can see there's a rubber plug on the back of the stator plate, on the back of the crankcase here, so we just basically remove it. It's the part to provide a watertight seal around the electrical. And you just slide it through here. We'll switch angles again. That out will come. Stator and all the electrical. Okay, so to split the crankcase, now that we removed the stator and the flywheel, we've removed the crankcase bolts, and there's a sequence in the manual that that the bolts need to come out. So the bolts also are different lengths depending on where they are. So what I basically did is, and I'll show you a picture of this, but if you look in the manual, each of these bolt holes is numbered. So I just created bags basically and labeled them and just said, you know, these are bolts, you know, 2, 4, 6, and 7, for example, and these are bolts 1, 2, 3, 4, just to keep it all straight so it goes back together easy. So now here's the reveal of the crankcase. So let's see what happened here. So now it comes. Now in terms of why this was seized, after I split the case and got the crankshaft out, I checked each of the bearings and noticed that these bearings spin with the exception of this one, and this bearing seized. So rather than being the PTO bearing, which I suspected over here, the issue that we're dealing with is this bearing seized. So this is the magneto side, bearing number 1. This is the push rod assembly, and that's the defective bearing. So I'm gonna go make some calls and we'll see if we can figure out what happened. The only thing that's interesting is I noticed that there was some scoring in this cylinder and on the piston in this magneto side. So wondering one of 2 things. Did this side for some reason not get oil, which caused a scoring in this bearing to seize? Or did this bearing let go and shoot some debris up into the cylinder that ultimately ended up damaging the cylinder? But I'm going to do some homework and stay tuned to the next video in the series when we fix the problem.